Hello and welcome to Esoteriliana. Today we're going to be talking about how to create system change. Before we start, let's talk about what a system is. So a system is a larger organism that is comprised of smaller functioning parts. Okay? And the information that we're going to be talking about today is largely stemming from a piece by Donella Meadows. It's called Leverage Points, Places to Intervene in a System. So leverage points vary in effectiveness, right? So here's a lever. If you push here, you need to exert more force than if you're way over here, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about 12 leverage points from least effective to most effective. And what I'm going to do along the way is provide examples with a system that most people are aware of, which is the body. And I do that because I want this to be simple and effective, and also because with the law of correspondence, you can see my other video about the universal laws, as above, so below, as below, so above. So when we think about our own bodies and how they are aligned or misaligned, we see that reflected in our outside world, in the macrocosm. So if we can align our bodies, we can align with the larger macrocosm and vice versa. So just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so let's start. And bear with me, I have a lot of notes and I'm not going to memorize them. So here we go. The weakest leverage point is parameters or constants or numbers, basically. In terms of the body, this would be like changing how you eat from one day to the next, or changing the hours, the time that you eat, or, taking 3 deep breaths and then breathing really fast, or just small fluctuations in an overall stable system. So changing how you eat in one day isn't really going to impact your whole physique, your whole lifestyle, right? So this is the weakest leverage point. The number 11 is buffers. So buffers play a huge role in stabilizing systems. So in terms of your body, you can think of your fat cells. Do you have a lot of fat or little fat? Do you have a lot of storage or little? So if you're changing how much you eat and you have very little fat cells, very little buffers, then you are more susceptible to change from number 12. So this is where buffers can play a huge role, but they can also create obstacles in terms of making it more difficult to change a system. If you have too if the buffers are too big, you create more stagnation and makes it harder to change. Okay, so let's talk about 10. And here we're talking about structure. So the structure of material stocks and flows, such as transport networks, population age structures. So with structures, this is a little more difficult to change, but can have a more dramatic effect on a system. So when we think about our body, you think, okay, if you break your nose, that can significantly impact your respiratory system. Or if you get bypass surgery, you can change the structure of your stomach and then limit your intake of food, for instance. But changing the structure is relatively difficult, and it's costly in many ways. You don't want to just remove a leg or remove a whole section of your system. So structures can, if changed, can drastically transform the system or have very costly impact. Okay, so number 9 is the lengths of delays relative to the rate of system changes. So let's think about, okay, if you're trying to get buff, if you haven't reached puberty, it's way more difficult to get buff than before than after. So there are these certain delays that are necessary to the cycles of systems, and you can't do much about them, but they play a huge role in how a system functions. Another example is like losing weight. losing weight often takes a long time, and when people don't see immediate results, they start to oscillate in their habits. But so these delays require a level of persistence to create change. Okay, so these are the more physical structure or the physical aspects of a system. Now we're going to transition into the information and flows. So number 8 is negative feedback loops. Negative feedback loops are self-regulating systems, self-correcting mechanisms. So an example for your body is sweating or shivering to maintain your body temperature, or sleeping and resting or meditating to recuperate from a large use of energy, for example. So oftentimes we see these self-correcting mechanisms as costly, but they're very crucial to maintaining the system and allowing it to not have these dramatic changes. Okay, number 7 is positive feedback loops. Okay, so this is different than negative feedback loops. Here we have self-reinforcing mechanisms. So positive feedback loops, you can either allow a mechanism to keep going unchecked, or what you can do is to reduce the gains of the positive feedback loop in order to alter that specific part of the system. So for our bodies, you can think of addictions to food, to exercise, to drugs, to sex, to whatever you can think of. You get a release of endorphins, for instance, when you get a lot of exercise and you start to get this high. And so something you can do to, not push yourself excessively and reach the state of collapse or erosion is minimize the effect of each of those addictive substances or actions. So realizing that ultimately, your addiction has more cons than you realize or than you originally thought, then you can start to say, okay, I'm not going to go down the path of full overdose. Okay, so number 6 is information flows. This is who does or does not have access to information. So here, a crucial one is, for instance, going to the doctor and getting a checkup. So how are your cholesterol levels? How are your glucose levels, etc.? If you don't know what's going on with your body, you can't really change things. It's a lot more difficult to change things. And many people aren't able to really listen to their bodies and say, okay, I feel that this is wrong, so I'm going to change it. And getting an exam can be very important in changing your body system. And actually, insurance companies pay their employees to get health screened so that they can reduce healthcare costs overall in the long term. So that's super important. All right, we're moving up. Number 5 is rules. So the rules of the system have a huge impact on how the system ultimately reacts and functions in general. In terms of our body, we can think about, okay, so what is the rule? What are expectations? What is normal in terms of our body? In our society, we often think, okay, our body has to be and look a certain way. Rather than saying, okay, your body has to be healthy, you say, okay, you have to look thin. You have to look nice this way or that way. And so what that does is it allows for people to be bulimic or for people to be drug addicts and say, okay, I'm incentivized to do this because I look thin, even though I'm rotting on the inside. So the rules, if you change them, can significantly impact behavior, but they can also limit systems if they're not aligned with the higher leverage points. So number 4 is the ability to self-organize. So this is the power to add, change, or evolve a system structure. And essentially this means changing any of the leverage points below. So a huge example in changing your body is changing your habits. So organizing through educating yourself, through trying out different diet programs or whatever it is, you're beginning to have agency over how the system functions overall. So this is very important. It's still not as important as the top 3, but it's huge in allowing these other things to change. And self-organization is huge because allows for a period of experimentation and change and variability, which is why it's feared so much, because a lot of people fear change and want to maintain the status quo. So a lot of people want to maintain the status quo of how their body feels and are scared to try new options for fear of failure or for fear of not being successful. Okay, so number 3, we have goals. Goals are really just asking us, why does a system exist in the first place? What is the purpose of the system itself? Do you live to eat, or do you eat to live? Do you control your consumption to look good, or do you eat nutritious food to feel vibrant, joyful, alive, to appreciate life to the fullest? Do you lose weight to fit certain standards, or do you do it to feel inner peace and to be the best version of yourself, to give value to your holy temple? Do you meditate to feel cool, or do you do it to connect with spirit? So these are crucial questions that set the tone for the other parts of the system. They are what drive the system. So goals are super important. Paradigm. The mindset or paradigm out of which the system arises. These are goals, structures, rules, delays, parameters, etc. So paradigm has to do with the underlying assumptions, the unstated beliefs that underlie everything else. So if you make an assumption, that your assumptions allow for the goals to arise and the rules, etc. So an example for your body is, okay, the body is something to be controlled, or the body is something of value that should be honored, respected, and loved. Those assumptions can make a huge difference. Is the body the manifestation of our truest self, or is it a transient vehicle through which we experience this life? It's your choice. Those underlying assumptions have an impact on how your body is going to function, how you will treat it, the purpose of it in your life, etc. So your paradigm it plays a huge role, and it's in order to change your body or the overall system, you need to open your mind to other possibilities, other ways of living, other ways of being and relating to your reality. So this is one of the most difficult things to change, but it's one of the most powerful levers. And your paradigm can shift in an instant. So that's why it might be difficult, but it can also be instantaneous. And lastly, we have the ability to transcend paradigms. And this is the biggest one. The ability to detach from a specific way of thinking, a specific way to relating to your body. If you can do this, everything else flows how you want it to. So staying unattached to a paradigm, staying flexible and realizing there is no one specific true paradigm. You let go into not knowing. You delve in and you savor the unknown. So for example, some people once they change their paradigm, change their goals, and create new habits for themselves and their body, they'll attach to a specific diet plan or a specific exercise regimen or something. And they don't realize that. And they also try to push that on other people too. Same with like religion or something. But if you're able to see that actually my body can, sometimes I can work out every day for a few months, or sometimes, I need to recuperate, or I can have that chocolate, or I can abstain from sugar completely, whatever that choice may be. If you are able to be in this very difficult space of flowing with your reality and with your body, that is the bliss point that is hard to reach, but the most powerful point to be in a system. And I'll leave you in terms of with Donella Meadows' piece. Here's a quote that she wrote. "It is in this space of mastery over paradigms that people throw off addictions, live in constant joy, bring down empires, get locked up or burned at the stake, or crucified or shot, and have impacts that last for millennia." So that tells you how powerful number one is. A few notes from her piece is that the order is not completely fixed, and each bullet has an exception, and it takes hard work at any point on in this list. The higher the leverage point, the more the system will resist changing it. That's why societies have to rub out truly enlightened beings. The higher up, the harder it is to change. Mastery in changing systems has less to do with pushing leverage points than it does with strategically, profoundly, madly letting go. Okay, so yeah, I think that's all I have for you. You can do what you want with this information. I encourage you to apply it to economic, political, social systems that you're thinking about seeking to change. There are a lot of broken systems out there. I'm not going to impose my own beliefs, but I want to leave you with a powerful tool in understanding how systems work and how you can change them. So if you like this video, please like, share, and see you next time.